Okay, we're just about ready to get started here, everyone. So hello, my name is Philip Znak. I'm just going to go through a bit of housekeeping items before we get started. I'm the Educational Technology Committee, ETC representative for La Cité Collégiale. The virtual Lunch and Learn webinar series is brought to you by the ETC. The ETC is comprised of members from all 24 colleges in Ontario, Canada. The sharing of ideas, best practices, and teaching and learning strategies related to the use of technologies inside and outside of the classroom is a central characteristic of the committee and the inspiration for this webinar series. If you'd like to facilitate a webinar, we are accepting volunteers for the winter 2021 term. So we will be sharing links out in the chat. So if you want to click on that link and sign up, we'd love to have you. In addition to this webinar, we have one more upcoming in our series for this semester. Visit our website to sign up for more of the webinars. Our next webinar is Liquid Syllabus, the first step to making a connection and reducing student anxiety. And it's on Friday, December 4th at 11 a.m. Last but not least, if you'd like to join our webinar mailing list, stay informed about upcoming webinars each term, opportunities to facilitate webinars, and information about the Advancing Learning Conference, visit the link on the screen. We will also be sharing it out in the chat and join our mailing list. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Salvador Garcia Martinez from George Brown College. He'll be facilitating our webinar today, Educational Video Game Design, Choose Your Own Adventure Games. Over to you, Salvador.
Thank you very much, Philippe, and thank you everybody for joining the seminar. Let me share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint slides. Just give me 1 second. Can somebody confirm if you can see my slideshow on the screen? Awesome, thank you. Thank you. So I'm not putting it a full slideshow, so it's a bit easier for me to see what is coming. So just come with me with the PowerPoint interface. But I will show you some parts where I have to use the full screen. But in the meantime, just come with me with that. I think that should be enough for providing the information that I want to share. And well, thank you very much. Let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Salvador Garcia Martinez. I'm a learning technologies specialist at George Brown College. So what I do mostly is to create interactive experiences for different courses. I have designed a couple of educational games, but nothing fancy commercial games, something small. And a couple years ago, when I was living in Mexico, I'm from Mexico, by the way, I created a couple of games to help people to rehabilitate after a stroke. I don't have experience designing commercial games, but I have experience designing some educational or serious games. And also as part of my responsibilities, I deal with all the e-learning analytics of the usage of the learning management system. And I also provide training to faculty members about the use of educational technologies, including Blackboard, the one that you are using it right now. So the goal for this seminar, this last workshop, is for me to show you not necessarily all the design methodologies or techniques to create this type of games. It's more just to give you a glimpse of which things maybe you want to think about when using these type of experiences. And and provide you the basics if you decide to develop something that you can use using experiences. And also I want you to think about how you can incorporate it as part of your classroom. I think that somebody has some questions. So Christina, you have your hand up. Do you have any question? Oh, probably it was an accident. It's fine. So let's start. So what I mean with choose your own adventure games. So everything is in the roots of this type of branching scenarios that are commonly used in education for educational purposes. For example, in this scenario, there is a story. We are asking to the user, what would you do in this situation? I'm not providing much detail about the situation, but just imagine there is somebody who is going to work and has a meeting. So you can cancel the meeting, inform your colleagues in advance, or ask your manager to join. So depending on what you choose, there is a different scenario that the user has to experience. And based on the narrative and other elements, they are learning whatever learning goals you have on mind. So the roots of this is also based on storytelling. If you recall in your childhood years, there were these books where it was very similar that you had to choose something and then you were going to another page of the book, you were experiencing part of the story, and then you were coming back to another section. And depending on your choices, the story will evolve in different ways. So this is what we mean with this type of experiences. So now, why or when it becomes a game? When in addition to that, you add other elements that are inspiring video games. For example, one of them is time. In some cases, they have a timer to choose an answer that puts a bit of pressure to the user about what to choose. According to what time is, there some options can be blocked, so the user have a limited set of options. So for example, in this case, we can assume that maybe the person is a bit late and didn't prepare for a meeting. So two options, cancel the meeting or inform your colleagues in advance, are not an option anymore because the time that is the present time. So the only option is ask your manager to join. So you are adding a bit of gaming elements, and this is mostly inspiration from video games. And this is also another way of making it to become a game, is providing feedback. For example, in the previous slide, we can see that it is gray. So there is the feeling that maybe it's not the best situation to take a decision. And in this slide, the feedback is more blue color light, and the person in the background is happy. So you can see that something is going on positive. In this case, the system, we can assume that everything is going well. So you don't need your manager. You don't have to ask this person to join. And it's saying that the manager is busy. But then you have two other options. So that's when it becomes a game, when you're playing a bit with some mechanics that can add extra interaction to the experience. So now, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. Now, I want to have small discussions about games for learning and what are the pros and cons. So games is digital games. I'm talking about digital games. It is a very big area. So there are many types of games. So in the literature, often we see that they say that games are more engaging, they make experiences more engaging, make learning fun, and all these type of things. But it really depends on the type of game. So it's really hard to tell what's the pros and cons of a game because this is a particular type of games. What I will tell you is that if it fits in your course, that's a good reason to use this game. Don't think about if a game becomes experience more engaging or not, or whatever. Just think about if it's the right fit to your course, and if you have the resources to develop it, then it will be a good tool for learning. Also, when thinking about video games, this is the first thing that comes to the mind of everybody. The name of this game is called Mass Effect. The first one was developed, I think, like around 10, 15 years ago. It's old, but not that old. And it is also based on decisions. So there is some adventures, then something happens, and you can take a decision, and based on that, the story changes. And something you have to be careful is that students, or even ourselves, we believe that video games is that. But video games, again, is like a very different spectrum. So it's always good to clarify that this is going to be a game, but don't think that it's going to be a game similar to the ones that you play on Xbox or PlayStation. You have to let them know what you mean. And often, I don't even say that it's a game. I just say that it's an interactive activity, so people don't get confused, so they don't have different expectations. So keep that on mind. So now, when thinking about this specific type of games, the first thing that we want to think, where do I start? Okay, so we decided that this is a good fit for a course. Why? Because maybe we want a student to experience different sides of something. For example, if somebody is in social science and is dealing with people who are requesting some support, you want to see what happens when we answer different type of questions. So the first thing I would recommend is to do a good brainstorming session, and not just about how can we do a game. It's including which type of interventions or tools we can create to teach in a better way this topic. Yes, games is an option, but maybe you have enough TAs in your course. Discussion forums is a better option. I don't know. A game by itself, it may be powerful, but there is an entire context that you have to think about. So brainstorming is very important. And there are different types of brainstorming in teams, by yourself. Some people say that you have some Lego pieces around the table and you let people to play with them before a session. That increases their creativity. On my personal experience, that didn't work that much. Well, for many people, that works. I know that many of my team members are very happy with that experience. So, that's things to consider. How can you enhance the creativity of the people involved in the brainstorming? And let's say that you already also know the learning goals of your experience. That doesn't have to do with a game or not. It's more like what you want users to learn. And once that you decide of what you want to do, then you can think about the game goals. So there are two types of goals: the learning goals, that is what you want the students to learn or users, and game goals is that what's the ultimate objective of the game. So, for example, one professor that I know created an experience where they were discussing about the Silk Route in history. So this is an ancient route that people using for trading objects. It was part of the economy of the ancient times. I forgot about the era, so I apologize. History is not necessarily the skill that I have on the top of my head right now. But believe me, that was an important event in history. So the learning goals for this experience is to recall the main historical events during the experience. Sorry, I think that I lost connection. So I will repeat what I just said. So the two learning goals for this experience was one, to recall main historical events, and the second, to understand the trading practices slash economy when people were in this route. Actually, that gives me some hints of which type of experiences I want to create. So this type of games could be interesting because then you can experience different documented uh, historical facts that happen. So depending on the decisions of the user, you can explore different things. And also you can create a more economy based layer where user can play with money. So the goal will be to maximize profit in the game. So the game of the goals will be to travel all the sea routes so students can experience everything, and also to maximize profit. Who is going to win the game? The person who had most of the profit. And that's again in the gaming context. So, do you have any questions until now? Good. If any, I will proceed with the next part of the slides. Sorry about this. I close my Teams. Okay, just one second. Okay, this is much better. Okay, so the next part I want to cover is a bit of when we're talking about of a game, which are the elements that we have to think about. So as you may recall from video games, aesthetics is a very important part. How the game looks like, how it sounds, how smooth the experience is. Story, and that's one of the key elements for this type of games. What's happening during this game? Mechanics, that's a very second important element for this type of games. How you want users to play in this game. And finally, technology. What are going to be users, how they're going to play the game using a mobile device, for example, a computer. We can assume that many users use mobile devices and may be correct, but there are some type of games that cannot necessarily be played in a mobile device. So think about all these fancy PlayStation games. Maybe they don't translate that well on a mobile device. So keep in mind, most of these type of games, users can play them on a mobile device. There may be some exceptions when you get very fancy, but still don't assume that everybody's going to use only one type of device. And but now what is important is to think about where is the educational part in this type of games. So what I can tell you is that the educational elements cover, or the pedagogical elements, sorry, cover all the areas of the game, of a game. However, in this case, the most important ones, as I was saying, is mechanics or story. So if your students have to do this game because they want to learn from it, and in some cases actually want to test based on what they learn, then story is something very important. Then you have to write things very carefully. Even if the game maybe doesn't look as flashy as other games, it's okay. I think that because the scope and the goal of the game is totally fine. Mechanics are also very important because if the students they cannot play the game or it's not clear how to play the game, they will never achieve either the goals of the game or the learning goals. So that's something you also have to be careful. And finally, how you are using technology. Again, that technology is something you have to keep in mind. Something that you also have to keep in mind is that even if you create a game, don't think that everybody is into games. So my recommendation is always to provide some alternatives. So people maybe don't want to play the game. At least they have access to a book where they can learn the same content in a different format. And this is also following the UDL, Universal Design for Learning principle. So just keep that in mind, that don't assume that everybody's going to have the most optimal experience of a game. But if you decide in a very good way, we are hoping that most of the people are going to get a good learning experience from it. So I will continue with the next slide. And this is an example that we designed by my colleague Liz Romero and myself about a game. So the main goal, so the context is that we wanted to people who were going for an internship in an international context to to make them aware of the cultural context, the things that they had to keep in mind. I wanted to do something more based on narrative, where the main character could experience different events. So, for example, in this case, the main character is called Samantha, is the lady that you see on the left. And there are some secondary characters, like the lady who is on the right, who is the receptionist. So this is mostly the context of the game that I'm using as an example. But now let's talk about the different elements that we design when doing this game. So the first one is the story elements. So mostly what happened is that we have a subject matter expert who wrote the story that I wanted to tell in this type of experience. And my colleague Liz, who is instructional designer, and myself, we created this experience. My colleague refined parts of the story to adapt it in a better way to this type of experience, but together we created the complete package. So think about the story elements. I will give you some tips that could be useful. Just let me check my notes. Okay, so The first tip is the point of view. So you can use different persons when using in narration. So all these tips are mostly borrowed from narrative elements. So in writing a story, you can use a second person. That means you. So for example, in this case, you can put yourself in the shoes of the characters. So imagine that I am Samantha, and the way that you write the text could be, so you are entering to a room, your boss is approaching, what would you do? So this type of way of writing puts more emphasis on the person who is actually playing the game. So when there are critical decisions, they have more impact on the different choices that the user may have. Another way of writing is writing a third person. So in this case, Samantha is in the room. What will you do for her to talk in a more proper way to her manager? So you can say you are putting some distance between the user and the character. And in some cases, that can be very beneficial if you want to imagine that the person is watching a movie. If you want the person to don't be too involved in the story, that could be a good strategy. But if you want the user or the person to be part of the story, a better strategy is to use the second person. So let me go to the next slide. The second element are the characters, and this is also very important. You want to create someone that the character feels identified with. So in this case, the character that we created, Samantha, is a person who doesn't have a lot of experience internationally. She may be from international origins. We don't know. We try to make her as neutral as possible, so we have a wider access, so a wider audience that may identify with her. But still, we want to put a character that the user feels a connection with. And then we put other characters. The secondary characters were mostly used to put a richer context and to create some additional story elements. For example, we wanted to add a bit of humor, so we decided to do a receptionist that make the life of the character a bit complicated, and not because she wants to, it's just because the main character doesn't understand the context of this experience. So you can also play with all these secondary characters. So it's a bit different that in other games. In other games, the characters are some secondary characters are for decorative purposes. In this case, most of the characters, they have actually a role in the story. So I will move to the next slide. Just give me 1 second. So the third element that we have to think about is the setting. And the setting is very important. This includes the decisions, what would happen when the user chooses something, but also it describes the context. So for example, here the context, the main character is going to India. So the context is one country. Another context is that she's part of an internship program at George Brown. She's a young age, maybe she's around 20. And this type of details that enrich the story and provides more information to the user is considered the setting. So the setting means the context. A couple of tips here is that the main one is to play a bit with the voice of the story. What that means, as you know, in writing, there are two types of voices, passive voice and active voice. So passive voice is uh, like narrating in a more disconnected way, a more like subtle way. So you're not saying the things straight to the point. Something that a good analogy that I want to use is that if you're familiar with people who speak Spanish like myself or French, the way that we write is a bit less direct than like English. So we tend to write more in a passive way. So when you read something in English that we wrote, sometimes it sounds a bit like upside down. That's how it is. But like think about that. That's what I mean with passive voice, that you write in a not very direct way. So active voice is more direct. So English-speaking people are pretty good at doing this, so they talk straight to the point. So that's active voice. And think, when do you want to use this type of voices? For example, an active voice is when you want to have a more direct impact in the user. So when you want them to push them to do something. And passive voice is when maybe you want to make them think about something, to give them some space to contemplate the context or to understand more the situation. So, yeah, so think about how you can use a voice. So that's my main tip for the setting. And finally, like from the story perspective, conflict, that's the most important one, is that means choices. Which type of choices we are giving them and what are the consequences? So choices can be used in very different ways. One is mostly to put some entertainment in the story. They don't have a direct impact, so you just continue developing the story through some choices that are harmless, let's say. There are choices that actually are the critical ones that are going to change the flow of the game or the story. So these are the choices they have to think that may have more impact. And that's when you want to play with how you want to present these choices. In ideal case scenario, you want to create some ethical conflicts that the user don't know what's wrong or what's right. Maybe there is not even a wrong or right situation. Whatever they choose may have a consequence, and then you have, as a user, to decide towards where you want to go. So in this case, for example, Samantha can be more assertive and more firm, and that's going to imply maybe to go to a higher level position, but then she may get some enemies on the way. Another possibility could be for her to be more mild, to listen, so she may have a slower experience, but it may be a more pleasant experience. So is there a right or wrong answer? Not really, it's just different options. And that's what we mean with conflict. And finally, you can use this type of choices just to put the user in different paths. So for example, choose where you want to go, left, right, or the middle. So this is another type of way that you can use choices. So again, one that you have to be more to pay more attention to is the one that have a more impact in the story of the game or in the experience overall. And finally, endings. So for every action, there is a reaction. So the user can take many paths, and based on that, to have different endings. Or if you're having different game mechanics, for example, a score, according to the score, they also can have a different ending. It's just all the options they have when finishing the game. Most of the times there are good endings. The endings are not maybe the best ones, but they can bring some fun to the story. And there are endings that are more neutral. What maybe you want to do is to add a replay value. So whenever there is an ending, to encourage them to go back and to try different choices, so they can experience the game in a deeper way. That being said, I want to show you some common patterns when designing this type of games. So these patterns are taken from the source, standard patterns in choice-based games. This person, Sam Ashworth, is an expert in designing this type of games. So he's proposing like around 20 patterns, but these 5 are the most used ones. So the first one, time cave, is the most typical one. You have one decision that leads to 2 branches. So from one branch, you have the branches again split, and then you have many endings. This is the easiest one to design. One of the easiest one to design. The problem is that it requires a lot of work. So being realistic, this can consume hours to design the narrative for this type of games. So maybe you want to be a bit careful of how many options you want to give to the user. Similarly, you have the second pattern, the one that is on the right. The one is called quest. So again, the paths start to split, but each children path has many things inside. So it has mini games, let's call it like that. So after you finish one, you can go to another one in the same path, and then they can merge and then to continue with the story. This one, again, it requires a lot of work, but there is a space for the student to experience more situations. The third one, Gauntlet, that's the easiest one. So it's very linear. Students have some choices. However, the choices they don't have much impact in the story. It's mostly to make them think about something. So, when creating something, this is a good way to start to do a pilot game using this type of strategies. You can always ask feedback to the students, see what they think, and based on that, for the next iteration of the game, to make something more complex. And the one that I always recommend is the one that is called branch and bottleneck. That is the third one on the left. So this is very useful because you can expand some part of the game and then you can join all the branches in one specific point, and from there to start again. So you don't have to worry about too many different endings and too many options, or to get away too much from the main plot of the game. So you can still give the students the freedom to experience different sides of the game, but then they will merge in the story again in a common point, and then they will divide again. So I find that a very good pattern to follow. The one in the picture may look too complex, so probably you want to do something a bit milder, but think about it as an overall picture. So for these four patterns, the ones that I just covered, what is handy is that you don't need hardcore game mechanics. Even if you use minimum game mechanics, maybe just using choices, you can follow these patterns. The last one, loop and grow, sorry, it mostly has the same linear element as circle. However, based on the gaming elements, for example, statistics in the game, the story can change. So, for example, let's say that you have a game, again, like coming back to Samantha, and maybe at the beginning, her confidence level is 1. Then she can do one loop in the story and there's something, and then her confidence level is going to raise to 5. Then she's going to do another loop in the story, and maybe she's going to experience different things because she has a better understanding of other things. If she does something different, maybe she can go back one level and to experience different things. So you can play with this type of statistics. The main problem is that then you have to go into coding these specific mechanics, and not all the environments have these capabilities. So probably you have to go to a more specific game engine, or to know basic scripting for PowerPoint or other tools that you may be using. So just keep that on mind. Just 1 second. So now I want to spend a bit more time talking about choices. I already gave you the quick overview about how does that work. But now like some tips about how to design choices. So my first tip would be to put a lot of emphasis in the first choice. So this is going to be the one that has the most impact in the user. And I'm talking about the first real choice, the one is going to be critical. You can put maybe as a tutorial some fake choices before so they get to know the environment. But the first one who has an impact in the user is going to last for the entire game. So keep that in mind. And that's something maybe you want to carry to other branches of the story. Then you have the second type of choices I already talked about, like which way choices. You want to choose left or right, you decide. It has an impact in the story, but not necessarily about of the ethical aspect of the story or the dilemmas that you want to create in the user. But then you have the choices that are more meaningful and decorative. So again, meaningful choices are the ones that have a higher impact in the story, and decorative choices is something just to create a more engaging experience. So think about that. You can choose different ways for your choices. And then other things that you have to think about is the length of a branch. Maybe you don't want to create something too long, especially if you want to increase the level of replayability in the game. So if you want the user to try the game many times, you want to do something a bit shorter. The balance or the branches. So you don't want also to do one branch that it takes 30 minutes to go through and another one that is just 2 minutes. So then when the student replays the game, it's going to be confused why it's taking so long to finish or so not long. And you may hint things that maybe they are choosing the right choice and that's why they don't have other choices. So just think about the balance. And finally, what I was talking about, to rejoin at specific points of the game so it doesn't get too much time consuming the design of the game. So this is my next tip for this. And finally, the mechanics of the game. Again, depending on the type of tool that you are using, you can choose different mechanics. And this is what I mean is that what you need to do to make the difference between a choose your own to a branching scenario to choose your own adventure type of games. So type of mechanics could be the time, as I mentioned before, a score or the money that they are getting in the game, but also the in-class activities. That's something that I will put as part of a game mechanics. Maybe you are using the game to open up discussion as a discussion artifact, and then you want to chat with the students why they took some decisions. Maybe you want to ask them to write an assignment or an essay about the experience in the game. That's part of the game mechanic slash of the learning experience. So there is a very thin line between game mechanics and learning mechanics. You can call it like that. Anyway, just keep in mind that mechanics, that doesn't mean only digital mechanics. That's something that you can also implement as part of your teaching or learning experience. So now I will show you some examples of what you can do using some technologies. So the one I wanted to show you is PowerPoint. I think that this is the one that most of us we have access to. To getting into the advanced features of PowerPoint doesn't require programming skills. Still, it may need some technical skills, but it's not like learning to code. And you can create interesting experiences. So I will show you a couple of slides as an example. Just give me 1 second. So this is from current slide. So in this case, so this is how the game, so this part of the game starts. I added some animation. So this is an analogy of the user getting a message on Twitter, sorry. So this is a message, dear Amanda, thank you for applying to our institution. Would you like to join us? And all of this is made in PowerPoint. So then I created 2 buttons that link to different slides in PowerPoint. So for example, here you can go to this button, absolutely. I created an animation using a software called Beyond Animate. That's, creating animation is a different topic, but that's something that you can add here. I will go back. So another option is I have to think about it. So this leaves another branch of the story. So what I can suggest is always put a skip button in case that they already covered that part of the story and go back. So if they want to explore other parts of the story, they can go back to the game. So this is just an example of what can you do in PowerPoint. Oh, sorry, here I will stop the presentation. So an example of what you can do in PowerPoint to see the potential of this tool. So now the main limitation is that creating scores, time, and this type of elements that are more related to games can be more challenging. It requires to go into scripting. and you need some programming skills. But if you want to keep it simple, you can use PowerPoint for and do something quite powerful. Other tools that I can suggest, another one very used is Google Slides, that is very similar to PowerPoint. So the advantage of Google Slides is that everybody can use it using the link. PowerPoint, you have to share the file, especially if you are using interactive elements like animations or what I showed you. And maybe not all the students are going to have access to the most recent version of PowerPoint. So there may be some compatibility issues. Even if somebody is using a PC or a Macintosh, that could be an issue. But for example, if you are doing like a group activity and you're expecting that at least one person in the group is going to play the game for everybody, then you're on the safe side of using PowerPoint because you know that at least somebody is going to be able to run the game. Google Slides is less flashy than PowerPoint for sure. You cannot do as many nice things and you don't have all these templates. However, you can be confident that most of the students are going to be able to use it. Another type of tools that are very common use for this type of games is Articulate, is Storyline, and Adobe Captivate. They are e-learning authoring tools, so they are mostly to deliver training, and they're specialized at some level to this type of experiences. So you can create different branches to add your content, to add some animation and some interactivity. Still adding gaming elements like a score is not as difficult as when you have to script to do something in a script using PowerPoint, but still you have to do a bit of playing with variables to do some very basic coding. However, if you have the advanced PowerPoint IT skills, it should not be too difficult to transition to this type of tools. But let's say I will put maybe PowerPoint on the intermediate one level. I would say Articulate, Storyline, Adobe Captivate will get more intermediate too. Then you have another tool that is getting very popular, H5P. I will show you examples after. So H5P, there is a free version that eCampus Ontario uses. It has a very specific tool to create branching scenarios that is not difficult to create. It provides templates, so you can add gaming elements like scores. However, it has some limitations. For example, you have to follow the template and the way that they ask you to do things, so you don't have as much freedom as other tools like PowerPoint and Storyline. And finally, there are two more tools that are specific for designing this type of games. One is called Twine, and another one is called Choice of Games. So this one involves some basic scripting. I will put it still intermediate to a slash advanced one type of tools. The main drawback is that they are not as flashy as other tools. So this is mostly text, a picture, button, and some statistics that the user can see. However, if your game is very based on the mechanics of the game, that's the type of tools that I encourage you to use. So let me show you an example that I did with my colleague Liz in Articulate Storyline. So this is the one that was showing you about the lady who is going to an internship. I will show you a specific chapter. So we had 6 chapters for this game. So I will give you a bit of the context. So the manager is introducing the main character to the coworkers, and she has to introduce herself to all of them. So as you can see, there are too many. So there is the ethical dilemma that she may not have the time to introduce herself to everybody. She may be tempted to do a group meeting, but that may not be accepted in the cultural context of this company. So I will just do a couple of things that may happen. So this is mostly stories. So I'm just going fast. And then you have the choices. What will you do? In this case, most of the choices are mostly to provide feedback. So if we choose the first one, is sorry, try again. In other scenario, you can direct the character to another branch of the story, but in this case, we wanted to keep it simple. Then that's correct. So we go to the next part of the game, of this episode. So I'm just going fast. So for choices, you don't also need to have all the time specific buttons. You can do the type of interactive experiences. For example, here I decided to do a click, point and click type of experience. So whenever you choose one character, you may have a different story. So for example, here I'm getting the information of this character, and that can be used to solve future mysteries of the game. I have a question, so let me read it. I so Sarah, she's asking what's the size of the element. I don't recall, to be honest, but it can get big. So I would say the PowerPoint that just the 2 slides or 3 slides that I put, because there is a video there, it may get more than 15 megas. So maybe when you're sending a video, you want them to choose like a YouTube link so they can see the video, or to upload the videos in another tool so it doesn't take all the space in PowerPoint. Because being realistic, the students, they won't be able to download a 50 megas PowerPoint slideshow. However, if you remove all the animations, movies, and this type of media, just interactions, they should not use too much space. So I think that maybe with 3 megas, you can have a pretty extensive interaction story. Now, this example that I'm showing you is using Storyline, and it can be exported to HTML. So again, what consumes a lot of space are the videos. If I was not using videos, it would be a short file, like was like again like 2 or 3 megas. But yeah, the videos are consuming a lot of space. I think that this one we split it in episodes. Each episode is around between 7 and 10 megas, and we have six of them. So now we were using one episode each week, so it wasn't that dramatic that it was a big experience. But if you are using it in one shot, it can be an issue. Yeah, thank you for asking. So well, this is a different way that you can provide different branches and interaction. So I wanted to show you. So just as a reference, so here, as I told you, I have 10 chapters. Each chapter lasts maybe between 3 and 5 minutes, including animations and reading, and it took me almost a term full time developing it. So that shows you the complexity of this type of games. But I also created all the animations using this software, that even if it's a type of rapid prototyping software, the Beyond Animate, it takes some time. So it really depends of how far you want to go, but just keep in mind that it may take some time to create a game. That's why I always suggest to do first a pilot to see how effective or what's the student's reaction, so you can assess how much time or resources you want to invest on it. And finally, I wanted to show you one that was developed using H5P. So again, you can get a license in eCampus Ontario. I paste the link in the chat. And it has other type of interactive activities, but this is one of the powerful ones. So just let me paste this link. Just give me 1 second. Somehow I cannot paste anything in the chat, but we can share the link and the PowerPoint slides after. Okay. So finally, I think that there is an issue with my share screen. So let me start it again. Sorry, I think that there is a bug. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
we're
hear
hearing
you.
you.
Okay, so probably the bug is only delaying the presentation and the screen, so I cannot show you the rest of the slides. But anyhow, I just have two more slides. So one was suggesting some games that are commercial, that are good to get some inspiration, and that will be my main advice. You want to learn about how to design games, play as much as you can. You want to get many ideas. Don't worry about the tips that I can share. This is just a shortcut, so you have the basis. So now play games, think about the tips that I gave you, and learn more. So this is the best way to learn, more than a tutorial. There are three games that I found quite interesting. One is called 80 Days by Meg. That's going to be hard to say, but it's yeah Yanth. I will share the PowerPoint slides after. Another one is Destiny Quest Infinite. And the other one is the branching scenario that I wanted to show you with the internet browser that I couldn't show you because this bug. Well, whenever you have the chance, take a look to them or at least find some videos on YouTube. They are quite interesting to analyze and to learn from for design purposes. Yeah, and mostly that's what I wanted to share for today's presentation. Do you have any questions? Oh, finally some magic happened, so I can share the link here. So, well, I will share the slideshow if that's possible, Gina, and also, well, if anything, feel free to reach. Well, thank you very much for coming.